going to go ahead and look at some logo redesign and rebrands. These are an important aspect of logo design. Many companies are going to already have an identity and they're going to approach you about freshening up or perhaps changing their identity completely. It's good to have a little bit of background in this so that you can make decisions that are going to positively affect the company. From time to time, a logo design is going to come along that really gets people talking. More often than not, it's because the design causes contention and it has some designers basically bending out of shape around the agency in question. In their defense, agencies responsible for contentious logos might say that the publicity gain simply adds to the effectiveness and memorability. But in saying that, do you want to be remembered for a logo that receives more bad remarks than good? Certainly, there is an effective way to rebrand and a not so effective way to do so. We're going to look at both. Whenever a rebrand becomes a consideration, be sure to ask, why does the audience need a new brand? In answering this question, your client is forced to articulate why a new identity design is necessary. Sometimes companies are reacting to their competitors, a case of keeping up with the Joneses, if you will, or perhaps they're looking to create a buzz associated with a new identity. Or maybe they just feel like they should follow trends. These are not really great reasons to rebrand and can result in disaster. Whatever the reason, and you certainly should help to make sure they are sound reasons before you proceed, make sure you encourage your client to proceed slowly and cautiously and refrain from responding to a gut reaction. A company may have built enormous equity around a strong and long-standing brand identity, so it's vital not to disregard it, and definitely don't disregard it entirely and all at once. A better idea might be to refine or refresh the current system rather than to opt for a complete overhaul. Refinement here and there that still retain the equity brand behind the visuals is often a good approach. If the identity has become a little dated, then this can be a great way to freshen up the brand without sacrificing loyalty and familiarity. Let's go ahead and look at a company that has successfully rebranded itself over the last century. General Electric. This is a company that has a great history. It was formed in 1892 by the merger of Edison Electric Light Company and Thomas Houston Electric Company. The basic logo font face is still quite similar to what it was in 1892. Over time, a circle engulfing the company name has been added to the logo, and it might be due to the increasing global presence and vision of the company. The current logo, which was designed by Wolf Olins, adds a blue color to the logo instead of the black color which has been used in all the previous logos. They also have changed the tagline of the company from "We bring good things to life" to "Imagination at work." You can see over time, though, very subtle changes have been made to the logo. You can actually see that the newest iteration of the logo actually kind of more resembles the logo that was released back in 1986. But certainly there's a clear connection to all the previous logos. The logo, even if we go back over 100 years, you can see that the style of the text is certainly reminiscent of the style that was used then. It basically hasn't changed very much since the 1900 version of the logo. And this is a great example of a company that has proceeded cautiously and slowly, and they just basically refreshed their logo to stay up with the times. The next company that we're going to look at is Pepsi. Today it's one of the biggest soft drink companies. It was first started in 1890, and it was initially called Brad's Drink. The name was quickly changed to Pepsi Cola, which is visible in the very first 1898 logo. Finally, in the early 1900s, the name was trademarked, and it hasn't been changed to date. In the early years, Brad made custom logo for the brand as it became more famous. And in about around 1930 or so, the company was bought by Loft Incorporated. The company changed the bottle size at that point from 6 ounces to 12 ounces, and it came up with the tagline "Refreshing and Healthful" on the logo. However, the true major breakthrough in the Pepsi logo design came around the 1940s, when the CEO of Pepsi at the time came up with the idea of a new bottle design, and he wanted to incorporate a crown having the Pepsi logo on it. This basically gave birth right in the early 1940s to the Pepsi Globe, and it basically emerged when the USA was in World War II, and to support the company's war efforts, Pepsi had a blue, red, and white logo. The logo became hugely popular, and it went to be the identifier for the company. As a result, in the 1950s and the 1960s, the bottle cap with the swirling blue and red became predominant in the company logo. During the 60s, it became even more popular, and the script was actually changed from the curly red script to the black sans serif script that was added onto the bottle cap. As we continue through the years, you can see the first appearance of the Pepsi Globe instead of the bottle cap in 1973. The typeface was made similar so that it was to fit in the globe. The Pepsi Globe was boxed in with a red bar coming in from the left and a light blue bar coming in from the right. In 1991, the typeface was then moved from inside the globe. The red bar was lengthened and the typeface came out on top of the globe. And then in the late 1990s, the white background in the logo was actually replaced by a blue color, and this also resulted in dropping the red horizontal band. The globe now took on a 3D graphic type of look, and it became a little bit larger than earlier versions. You can see something close to that version in this 2003 version. It might be that in this version right here, because the name Pepsi and the globe actually touch each other, the name the Pepsi Globe was actually given to the logo. After the late 1990s, it seems that Pepsi decided to give the globe even more prominence than the script itself. So the globe came on top of the script in 2003, as we see here. And finally, in the current logo that they're using today, they got rid of the script altogether. The Pepsi logo today is an interesting story. Pepsi paid over $1 million for its new logo. The Arnold Group produced a 27-page document that basically diagrams and supports the reasoning behind the rebrand strategy. Let's take a look at some of the illustrations that were provided. Within the document, there are links to the golden rectangle, the Mona Lisa, the Parthenon. It also is linked to the Earth's gravitational pull, the sun's radiation, energy fields that are in balance. It's really interesting to see what they basically came up with. And you can see that the change to the Pepsi logo is pretty subtle. I mean, basically they just took the little white swoosh and put it at an angle and made it so that it wasn't uniform. This has caused a great deal of debate in the design world, and some people like the new logo and some people don't at all. If you thought that Pepsi, like red and blue, were just the corporate colors that came from the client, that's actually wrong too. The color palette is actually derived using a scientific method of color assignment based on the product's essence and primary features. It's so scientific that it must be true. The document that was provided ends with a discussion of Pepsi's relationship to the speed of light. You really can't make this stuff up, so it's kind of interesting, and I guess it helps to solidify that, or at least helps Pepsi to feel that their $1 million was well spent. The next logo we're going to look at is Nike. Nike probably got the best deal amongst all the companies because the logo designer that designed the logo did it for just $35 in 1971. The main part of the logo, it hasn't really changed over time. However, I don't really understand why they waited 7 years before they realized that the text and the swoosh were overlapping each other. It's really hard to read in this early version right here. As the brand has gained recognition, the company name was finally dropped from the logo, which made it more simplistic and memorable. And the company has different variations of its logo for the various departments. Now they've branched off to Nike Soccer, Nike Skate, Nike Running. They're all different kinds of departments, but you can definitely always recognize that it's part of the Nike brand by the iconic Nike swoosh. Apple's the next company that we're going to look at. The first Apple logo was designed back in 1976 by Ronald Wayne, and he's sometimes referred to as the third co-founder of Apple. The logo, it actually depicts Isaac Newton sitting under a tree, and an apple is dangling right above his head. The phrase on the outside border, which I know you can't read, but it basically reads, "Newton, a mind forever, voyaging through strange seas of thought, alone." Not surprisingly, when this logo was in use, it basically only lasted 1 year, and then Steve Jobs commissioned a graphic designer named Rob Janoff to come up with something, I don't know, maybe a little bit more modern. And Janoff's eventual design would go on to become one of the most iconic and recognizable corporate logos in the history of, the US. According to Janoff, the bite in the Apple logo was originally implemented so that people would know that represented an apple and not a tomato. It also lent itself to the nerdy plan words of byte, B-Y-T-E. And it's certainly a fitting reference for a computer and tech company. As for the rainbow stripes that were in the logo, it's rumored that Steve Jobs insisted on using a colorful logo as a means to humanize the company. Janoff has said that there was no real rhyme or reason behind the placement of the colors themselves, noting that he wanted to have green on the top because that's where the leaf was. The relatively simple origins of the rainbow-colored Apple logo hasn't stopped some from reading a bit too much into what it represents. A former Apple executive has quiped about the logo that one of the deep mysteries to me is our logo, the symbol of lust and knowledge, bitten into and crossed with all the colors of the rainbow in the wrong order. You couldn't dream of a more appropriate logo. Lust, knowledge, hope, and anarchy. The passion of the French knows no bounds. The multicolored Apple logo was in use for 22 years before it was finally axed by Steve Jobs less than a year after his return to Apple in 1997. In the place of the new logo, they did away with the colorful stripes and replaced it with just a one-color monochromatic logo. Between 1998 and today, the replacement of the colorful stripes is certainly shown with a more modern and monochromatic look. It's taken on a variety of sizes and colors over the past few years. The overall shape of the logo, however, has remained unchanged since its original design over 30 years ago. Tinkering with one of the most recognizable logos in the world wasn't done simply because Steve Jobs is always looking to change things up. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was almost bankrupt. Jobs and the rest of the company realized that the Apple logo could be leveraged to their advantage. That meant experimenting with larger logos to make it more prominent, and if the shape of the Apple logo was universally recognizable, why not put it where people could see it? Apple began placing sizable, monochromatic styled logos on all its products in all sorts of places. The top of the original iMac, on the side of the Power Mac G4 tower, and in an assortment of colors on the good old iBooks. This trend, which basically began in about 1998, continues to this day. The monochromatic logo allows Apple a greater flexibility when it comes to branding its products. Steve Jobs needed to transform Apple's image from that of a failing company into one capable of churning out sleek and cutting-edge products, and he needed a new logo to match this. It doesn't appear likely that Apple will change its logo anytime soon, but one thing that will undoubtedly remain is the shape of the logo itself. FedEx is a really interesting story. FedEx originally was called Federal Express Corporation, and it basically invented the overnight shipping business back in 1973. At that time, the market was one-dimensional. One country, USA, they only shipped one type of package, a letter, and they had one delivery time. Then, by the early 1990s, the company began adding new services like next-day business, two-day economy. It was shipping packages to, a multitude of countries around the world. And by then, a host of competitors had also emerged. The company definitely needed to be able to better communicate its broad service offerings and reaffirm its position as the industry leader. They hired the design firm Landor in 1994 to create a new brand identity that would help reposition the delivery corporation. Landor did a lot of market research, and his study revealed that businesses and consumers were unaware of the global scope and full service capabilities offered by FedEx. They also believed that the company shipped only overnight and was only within the United States. Landor continued to conduct research, and they researched the actual name, the Federal Express name itself, and it found that many people negatively associated the word federal with government and bureaucracy, and the word express was overused in the United States alone, where many other companies were employing that word. So, on a more upbeat note, the research also revealed that customers and consumers had been shortening the company's name and turning it into a generic verb, such as, I need a package FedEx. This was regardless which shipper they were using. So this was great for the people that were going to rebrand the logo. They basically decided to shorten Federal Express into FedEx and use this as its communicative name. It better communicates the breadths of the services. They created over 300 initial designs just in the exploratory phase. And finally, they ended up with a visual identity that is really strong and is an excellent example of simplicity with some hidden meaning. If you're not already aware, in the FedEx logo, there's the little hidden arrow between the E and the X. A lot of people don't know this is there, but once you become aware of it, you cannot help but see it. When Landor himself was asked why he made the arrow so subtle, he replied in simple terminology, the power of the hidden arrow is simply that it is a hidden bonus. It is a positive reverse optical kind of thing. Either you see it or you don't. Importantly, not getting the punchline by not seeing the arrow does not reduce the impact of the logo's essential communication. On the other hand, if you do see the arrow or someone points it out to you, you're not going to forget it. And that's exactly what they succeeded in doing. The Gap is the last logo that I want to talk about. The Gap logo has caused a lot of controversy in the latter part of 2010. It basically, let's start by saying that it's, the phrase that there's no such thing as bad publicity, it kind of makes you wonder how true that statement actually is when you start to really delve into what happened with the Gap logo. You can see here I have the original Gap logo, I have the new Gap logo that was introduced, and then I have the original Gap logo again. This story is kind of a debacle, basically. It boils down to 3 failures. A failure of sourcing the right consultant, a launch failure, and a failure of belief and follow-through. These 3 significant failures were only the fuel. Then the internet basically brought the matches. Branding programs are never perfect, but even the most imperfect bursts can still lead to strong, healthy brands. This Gap logo, the new one that you see in the middle, had a shelf life of exactly 6 days. What the Gap did is they commissioned a design firm to come up with a new logo. Then they just kind of slipped the logo in on their website without really announcing it. It caused a huge explosion of negative coverage. And people on the internet, followers, there was blogs, people tweeting about it, you name it, people were complaining about the logo. Within 6 days, Gap pulled the logo and put their old logo right back up. And this was pretty much right in the middle of the Christmas season. I'm going to go ahead and just show you a website that basically ran a contest just to show you how many people were affected by the logo. This Scott Hansen's blog basically ran a Gap design contest, and he basically posed the question to people to redesign the Gap logo once they had seen the new logo, which was not well received. This is just one page of submissions, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. It's kind of interesting to see what people came up with, but you'll see that there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions. People were really ticked off about what the Gap did, and rightly so. The new logo that they tried to get out there didn't really help their company at all. It wasn't well thought through. It wasn't a good design, and it definitely failed miserably. In defense, though, of the design firm, Gap kind of dropped the ball too because they immediately caved. They should have supported their reason behind choosing that logo, or at least trying to, support it, I suppose. But they immediately caved within 6 days, not even really giving it much of a chance. But the story behind this particular case study is to really make sure that you do your diligence and homework and really research the company and what people are expecting before you go and redesign a logo. So at this point, I'm not even 1/3 of the way down the page. There are just hundreds and hundreds of submissions. I'm just going to scroll down really quickly so you can see the rest. You might want to come check this out on your own if you want. And if you want to get some more information about the Gap logo, if you just search for Gap logo, there's tons of information on the internet, tons of people complaining about it. It definitely drew a lot of attention to the company, but as I said, the negative publicity, I don't know if it was totally worth it. All right, it ends right about there, and then it goes into posts. Pretty interesting, though, that so many people felt so strongly that they were willing to actually redesign a logo and try to get it up there. So we'll see what happens with Gap in the coming years, and if they decide that they need to, try to redesign something once again. I hope that this discussion has shed some light into redesign and rebrand, and hopefully made you think a little bit more about why you would want to redesign or rebrand, and certainly how to approach it in a more effective way.